put out a planning document. They're proposing right now their comprehensive water plan for the Rio Grande Valley. And it's applicable primarily to the Rio Grande corridor, but what they're looking at doing, it's sort of a payment for ecosystem services kind of thing, where industry, private people, and so forth contribute to this fund, and that their primary goal is watershed protection, protecting source water. But at the same time, you can do your thinning, you can do your forest health restorations. That's one thing, when we look at laying out areas on the res, we're not just looking at where the funding comes from and meeting those goals alone. We've had the National Fire Plan dollars to do hazardous fuels reduction. But every time we go out there, we're trying to see, can we improve forest health? Can we knock down the mistletoe in that area? Can we prevent the bark beetles? Can we increase water yield? That's something the tribe has really gotten interested in the last few years. As we started going through with our logging and so forth, we started to have interactions with some of the different groups, ranchers and so forth, and we have talked to people like off of the northeast and eastern side of the reservation, and when we've given presentations, they went, well, we were wondering what was going on because this stream that hasn't flowed for 20 years or so, it started flowing again. You know, so we've been seeing those kind of things happening, hearing it from other people. Our reservation is the recharge area for a lot of south central and southeastern New Mexico. What we do there, the forest management on that reservation impacts all of us. You know, and these Sacramento Mountains, as a whole, they are that recharge area, but how much is really going on Forest Service lands? I mean, they're trying with their hands tied behind their back to overcome the litigation that they face. They're really not getting a whole lot done. And the whole center of activity is truly the Mescalero Apache Reservation. I mean, with almost 70,000 acres that we've done since our mill opened, that's a lot of work. And that wasn't paid for with grants. The logging itself, that was the tribe assuming all those costs, and we didn't always make a profit at that. That's part of why the mill went under. And so collectively, I think we need to find a way to keep these kind of industries alive. I know when the mill shut down a few years ago, I mean, there was a lot of people happy, like, ooh, competition's gone. But we really didn't compete at the same level. I mean, we need all of these businesses, the smaller Jippo loggers, like we call them. We need the people that use all the byproducts, you know, Sierra composting and those kind of people. You know, we need all of these industries to be strong and thriving to continue to do this kind of work here. And until Congress or somebody acknowledges that, and until we as a group come together, I don't know how we're going to continue doing this. Our mill shut down, was it last year?
Almost 2 years ago.
Yeah, July of 2012. And you know, we had gotten, back when it first shut down in 2009, we had been doing some forest studies, studies with Forest Product Lab that the Forest Service has up in Wisconsin. And they had evaluated the mill, they had evaluated our logging operations and so on. And we found that we had some inefficiencies. Our mill was designed for a larger diameter tree than we actually have. I mean, with our first few years, we had a lot of over 40-inch diameter trees that we were treating, but you know, as that came into check and as we started regulating and managing the overall densities, we didn't have a whole lot of those big trees anymore. And we have this whole preponderance of these little guys, you know, from 9 to 12 or 15 inches diameter, and our mill wasn't configured properly. So we did get an ARRA grant, American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, through the Forest Service. We did get a grant to retool the mill. We designed a large log line and a small log line parallel to one another and got that running again, but the markets hadn't changed. We still had market problems, bad market conditions, bad prices, and it was hard, and the tribe elected to close the mill. And one of the things we're trying to overcome internally is for the tribe itself to understand that that mill is just not about those 50 jobs. It's a whole lot more. I mean, it affects how much water we have in Mescalero, and not just us, but everybody. You know, what we do on our piece of land affects way beyond our boundaries. The watershed values are enormous around here, and I don't think, you know, I think we're in the same situation across this mountain chain, you know, with us, our own people focusing on how much income that mill can bring in, but also the feds, you know, focusing more on their, you know, trying not to get litigated and so forth, and somewhere we've got to come together and try to make these things happen as a group. We need to be able to work together more and realize that we're all in this together. We're all dependent on one another, and with the drought, with climate change, regardless of whether it's human-induced or just a natural cycle of the earth, we are seeing major changes. I mean, even on the reservation on our southern end, on the Cloudcroft side, I mean, we're joking around about the densities, but it's not really funny when you start seeing your domestic wells, or what domestic well levels dropping. We've had, on that end, we've had our, gosh, I can't remember what that well is called, but on that end of the reservation, there's a residential area, and we had to re-drill that well because our water table dropped on that side. And I mean, even though we're doing all this great forest thinning, that recharge area kind of exists more in that Cloudcroft area. And we can't do anything about that, you know, without your help. And that's the main message, I guess, I want to get across, is that we need to work together. We need to manage this whole mountain chain together. I mean, because theoretically, we could have a fire at one end. I mean, like Yellowstone was 1.2 million acres. I mean, we could burn this whole forest and not have anything between the two, you know, between Lincoln and Mescalero. We really need a concerted effort, a group effort, and I think like this Little Bear Fire Coalition, it's a great thing, but we need to keep it going, and we really need to lobby as a group and work together. We, like she said, we started out doing a lot of things on our own, you know. We didn't bring in other people, we didn't collaborate, you know, we kind of were antisocial, you know, but we have been coming to the meetings for a long time now and trying to pull, you know, but we need a little help right now too, and we're not able to do what we used to do, and we've been talking amongst ourselves, the different foresters we have, and 20-25 years, and we're going to be back where we started before we even had a mill. It doesn't take long. I mean, as we're opening these stands up and creating distance between the trees, we're getting a lot more ground cover, we're improving habitat, we're even having pollinators coming back. But what that also does is speed up the growth of everything. We've got outstanding growth on the reservation in those areas, and it's not kind of, you know, you're not thinking about it. You're thinking, oh, we're opening these up and reducing the fuels. No, we're creating way more, you know, we really are. And we've got areas where we literally have dog hair thickets of seedlings coming in because they've got released, and it's what that forest needed right there. So our job is far from done. You know, we're looking now to start trying to. It's really expensive to go in with chainsaws all the time and do thinning, and we are looking at trying to maintain with fire. But then we have to overcome some of these federal regulations that are kind of making it more difficult to do these things. We have really narrow windows now, being in this drought with all this wind. Somehow we have to make this happen. That's all I got to say.
Has the water shed improved any since that Little Bear Fire that burned all those trees?
I think so. I mean, we've seen this on the reservation where we've had really kind of some extensive damage. And I mean, after a couple of years, it does heal, and the trees do come back. But you lost a lot of habitat, you know, and we didn't have very much burn on the reservation. I think we only had a little over 300 acres. So I mean, on our side, our main issue is, and the reason why is because it hit that Eagle Creek fuel break project that she was talking about. Over at Eagle Creek, we had done a project because we were concerned our campers might cause a fire and be a liability for the tribe. 5, so we did a pretty extensive thinning project there. Not necessarily what we considered our best project area. It wasn't like where we go, if we were gonna pick a project to take a tour, we wouldn't have gone to that one. But that ended up being the little project that actually helped turn that fire, and I, you know, for the people that were that way, maybe that wasn't a good thing, but it did prevent it from going straight down the Rio Ruidoso. And it is really thick in there. I mean, that's some hairy ground that we have a hard time trying to treat. It's really steep, really dense, really rough too.
You talked some about pine bark beetle, and you're just looking at 20 or 25 years down the road, I'm beginning to wonder if there's even gonna be a forest around here in 20 or 25 years because of pine bark beetle. Because you are a reservation, can you do more out there as far as experimentation with sprays and other things like that as far as the pine bark beetle is concerned? I know there's some sprays out there that are effective.
I think theoretically we could, but honestly, I wouldn't support a spraying program. We started out as the Office of Environmental Protection. No, but I mean, they're terribly expensive. I don't think the cost benefit is really there. But what needs to be done is the thinning. The thinning, we had a bark beetle epidemic back in the 90s, and I was still back at BIA Forestry then. And I mean, when we saw what was going on, I mean, the tribe jumped on it right away. I mean, go take care of those dead trees, do what you have to do. And so we were able to mobilize. Back then, we got that paper company in Snowflake, Arizona. I don't remember. They're not in business anymore. But we were able to get a contract with them. We allowed harvest by our loggers, but we also brought in other contractors so we could accelerate. We accelerated our cut. We had some kind of accounting issues when we were doing our annual allowable cut. We had a few extra million board feet we still needed to cut. So we were able to mobilize and with BIA Forestry, timber sale people, and to be able to cut more within a given year and cut more aggressively in given areas. The main issue with bark beetles is they're hitting stressed trees, where they're too crowded or they're not getting enough light, nutrients, whatever. And as you open those up, those problems become less, quite a bit less. And we hit it really hard. We had what we call the Forest Health Protection, what was it? FHP. We had a big sale, we called that. I don't remember what it was called exactly, but we went and we hit it hard, and we haven't seen as much problems. And it typically bark beetles tend to come in after mistletoe, but not always. We had some really healthy, big, vibrant pine stands that were getting hit too.
And when
Your cutting problems, does that concentrate on the big brown trees that you see out there? I mean, is it?
No, we were going after dead trees, and we were also going after where it seemed like we were having a lot of activity. When you're walking in the forest, you can see the flickers and the woodpeckers hitting trees, and I mean, that's what I was doing when I was marking some of those areas. I got in trouble for marking too heavy, but the next year the trees that they marked back out were all dead. But we would go in and look, and if there was a lot of those kind of activities, we would mark those trees. We kind of had a philosophy at that time, guilt by association. So if you were a healthy tree standing next to one that was full of stuff, we would go ahead and chop you down.
And that sale, when she said that we hit it aggressively, it was really aggressively. There was a tremendous amount of volume that came off of this sale in response to addressing the bark beetle concerns. And we wouldn't have been able to do that if it hadn't been for the snowflake pulping. They were taking the trees down to 4 or 5 inch diameter, so it was a larger range of tree sizes that were getting removed, which helped with the overall efforts. It wasn't just going around chasing, the big trees or only the ones that were dying. It was removing across a large spectrum of tree diameters in these lands. And a lot of that is visible even today from Highway 244. You can drive. That
was our bark beetle area.
You can drive through, and then we hear that a lot. People say, "Oh, when you drive through Cloud Crop, it's just so beautiful on Highway 244." Well, that was where a lot of that really aggressive logging took place for bark beetle, and then also mistletoe, addressing mistletoe concerns.
This is the second time I've heard about the mistletoe problem.
Yeah, oh yeah, Mescalero is the heartland for ponderosa pine mistletoe that the Forest Service has.
Frank Hawksworth, I don't know if you guys have heard of him, he passed away a few years ago, but he did a lot of mistletoe research on the reservation. A lot of his,
The book about mistletoe was written based on information from the reservation, so we have a lot of tribal members, you'd be surprised, know about mistletoe, because they've had to go out and mark those trees and thin them.
we've had a long history of logging, like she said, but with the way it was run back in the day, before we had our own mill and before we actively participated in the management itself, we had a lot of high-risk logging, and they were just sanitation salvage, they were chasing insects, diseases, whatever, and we had huge areas of lots of, like, bazillions of little trees, you know. We have areas like that, and there were areas that back, and I think in the 50s and 60s, the tribe was trying to deal with the mistletoe, because at that time, our management was actually contributing to the mistletoe problem. And they had tried to set up a small log sale at that time, and still to this day, they could not sell it. They could not get people they could not make a profit off of trying to sell those small trees. And so they just stayed there until the mill opened in '87, and we all decided we were gonna hit it hard and get rid of that mistletoe. And that's still a primary emphasis now. I mean, we have a pretty active timber stand improvement program where we go in after logging, and we're really targeting mistletoe infected trees primarily, and we will take them down. I mean, we have prescriptions where take everything knee-high and above. That's our prescription. It's kind of informal, but it works.
I'm curious, where is the market for your forestry? Where do the logs that you at the mill, where do they go? Who
I
buys
don't
those?
really know that part of it that well. I don't know Mark Paul.
Up until the sawmill closed, the markets were really limited. When the sawmill wasn't producing any type of like dimensional lumber that was going to Lowe's or anything. They were doing these rough cut lumber, and it was going to pallet stock, a pallet company down in El Paso. There was a small niche market in Mexico for telephone poles, and another company that was using the lumber for building oil rigs. So there wasn't this big market for much of these trees, which is part of the reason why it went under. Also, the individual woodlots, some of them were just going to the mom and pop sawmills that they could broker or do whatever deals that they had with them.
You talked about the need to work together and how you need our help. What are some of the things that you see that need to be done that we as a community outside of the reservation can do?
I have a thing that I've always liked. I used to serve on the Collaborative Forest Restoration Program grant panel. I served on that for about 4 years, and I think my last year that I was on that panel, we had a really cool project come in. And we all really liked it, but it was kind of one of those esoteric things. And it was a payment for ecosystem services project being proposed by the city of Santa Fe. Santa Fe gets their water from somewhere in the mountains, just like Denver and some of those towns. And so the big concern was that some of the water supplies were dwindling, and how do you treat the forest, how do you pay for forest management treatments? They don't have milling or anything like that up there. How do you pay for those treatments? And so what they were proposing is, with the city of Santa Fe's water bill, that a portion of that would go towards forest enhancements, where the source of the water is coming from. And I think something like that necessarily has to come about, not just for Mescalero, but throughout the country. I think people that live in large urban areas need to acknowledge where their water comes from. something to be sustainable. We can't survive on grants forever. We had a huge cut in 2012, and I mean, we had like a 70% reduction in funding. I had to lay a crew off and numerous support staff, you know. How are we gonna continue to do this? I mean, that's one possible way, payment for ecosystem services, but also somehow, as a group, we need to be able to support forest industries in general, not just the tribes mill, but all these other small, you know, mom and pop groups and smaller value-added kind of businesses and so forth. I mean, I don't know, I don't have the answer, and that's kind of where I'm looking, you know, somehow though, we need to. And I still do feel, I mean, even on the reservation, we don't charge our own people for water, and for good reasons, but people have to acknowledge that that water comes from somewhere, it's not free, you know, and we need to pay for that. We need to pay for where it comes from and pay for making sure that those forested watersheds are properly managed.
Could you talk a little more about the specifics of what needs to happen to make prescribed burn part of this?
As more a safety thing, I think, is what's going on. And then probably your fire folks could speak a little better to that, because I'm not a fire person, and I'll be the first to admit it.
One of the, I guess, the stories that we always use in comparison is that Dave Koch, who she mentioned before, one of our former foresters, at one point he hooked up a tire with a chain to the back of his pickup truck, lit that tire on fire, and then just drove around, you know, lighting the forest in this burn area on fire. And it was like 2 or 3 people out there that day. We can't do that anymore. And we have these interagency prescribed burn guidelines that we work through. We have a lot that we have to consider, and a lot of factors that have to be mitigated. The complexity of the burn, infrastructure, homes, you know, those types of things. It really comes down to what we've been experiencing is just the changing window, the time frame to burn. We have, like last year, we had this extremely wet monsoon that went into late September, which is ideally when we'd like to start burning, but it causes huge green up, and everything was too green to burn. We couldn't do any burning. And then next thing you know, it was snowing. Well, you can't do prescribed burning when there's snow. And then all of a sudden, there's no snow, and everything's bone dry out there. So dealing with these smaller windows is really a huge factor in trying to implement these burns. And also just staffing and the funding and how we're gonna pay for these burns.
And I think to overcome that a little bit, I think what we're trying to do more now is to, we didn't have a federal agency overseeing us. We did a whole lot of burning before they finally realized that. But, and we got our hands slapped pretty good. But working with BI and working with the Forest Service and kind of sharing this responsibility, and recognizing each other's strong points. I mean, the Forest Service has tremendous planning capabilities, and their fire capabilities are really good, whereas we're really strong in thinning and harvesting and reducing densities, and it's just putting our good points together, I think, and trying to make these happen. I mean, really focusing on it. I mean, we are determined we need to do these sorts of things, and I don't think we're gonna have any choice in a few years. The funding is just not there to support $1,000 an acre thinning projects when burning maybe is $300 an acre, you know, at the highest, maybe.
The one aspect of prescribed fire,
Go
Yeah.
ahead.
that we do have control about, and I think you're alluding to, is public acceptance of prescribed fire on the landscape here. And actually, it's actually pretty good around Ruidoso. I think folks have seen prescribed fire for a long time. Folks that have lived here for a long time have seen it and are accepting of it as a tool. But we do have a lot more folks that continue to move here and aren't used to it. And I've seen that be a make or break thing. If most of the community is behind it, supportive of it, it that can really put a damper on your burn program, even if you're doing everything right. So that's one aspect that we do have control over, is public acceptance and support of the agency program.
Yeah, that's true, and the funding part, just to give you a little, I mean, we're not just standing up here complaining about funding, but it's just really been drastic. In 2010, we received $2.7 million in funding for hazardous fuels reduction. That was doing the logging commingle project, thinning with Thora's crew, that was prescribed burning, a whole gamut of different types of projects. The very next year, we received $850,000, I believe, in 2011, and then even less in 2012. Last year received, just barely over $500,000. So I think in response to these large fires that we've had in the past couple of years, like the Walla fire, the fatalities that occurred last year in Arizona, that's gonna start swinging back up because, ooh, you know, it's a big issue. One of the things I think that private citizens can do is just request for the lawmakers to stabilize this funding. One of the other issues that's been a big concern for me is that the priority for funding has always been centered around wildland-urban interface, which makes sense. But having that priority be in one area means that critical areas like watersheds that are removed from the wildland-urban interface haven't been able to have the same type of attention or treatments that forests immediately around communities have had. And just to really protect the landscape as a whole, we need to have the ability to treat different types of areas. And if we have a critical watershed identified, we need to be able to have that funded, even though it's not in technically a WUI area. I think we have time for one more question. You guys have one more?
Actually, we need to give the firefighters just a little minute to
Okay.
make an announcement too. But I'd really like to thank you guys. I learned a lot. And I think this needs to continue to be an ongoing conversation with all of us. I do want to give just a minute to Captain Cody Thetford from the Ruidoso Fire Department. He's got an announcement to make.
Thank you all for your time. Like she said, my name is Cody Thetford. I'd like to just bring everybody up to speed. There's going to be some changes effective tomorrow at 8 a.m. Our fire restrictions are going to change from level 1. We're going to be going into level 2 at 8 a.m. tomorrow. So I'll go through these. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them the best I can. You're always welcome to go to our village website. You can call or go by the fire station and sit down with Chief Vincent, who's always real encouraging to get people to come in and visit with him so we can educate and just keep everybody informed. Like I said, these are level 2. There's not going to be any more charcoal or stoves or outdoor cooking appliances. Gas only. When we go into level 2, it'll be gas only. Approved appliances for gas. There will be no outside smoking on public or private lands unless permitted per the fire chief, which is Harley Vincent. Fireworks are restricted by state law, and that's year-round. No campfires in the village of Ruidoso. If operating chainsaw or other equipment powered by internal combustion engine, it's allowed with a spark arrestor device, maintained in effective order. If you don't know or you don't know how to maintenance them, you can come by the fire department. I believe y'all do that, Dick? Okay, you can go see him over there, and he'll take a look at it. And then we have also the welding or cutting torches that we've had, private contractors or things like that around the village, unless they're permitted by the fire marshal for that job or announced so everybody's aware of what's going on. You won't be able to do that unless you